High level donor advised funds, they make sense when you want to give to charity, but want to do smaller amounts, typically under 500,000. And you don't necessarily know which charity you want to give to right away. You may want to give to multiple charities or give it over time. They give you some flexibility there. Maybe we want to, Peter, just run through some pros and cons.
Yeah, so pros and cons. So probably the biggest pro is the two biggest pros are simplicity and low cost. And so right now, if you want to set up a DAF, you can go to your broker probably if you use Fidelity or Schwab or Vanguard or really any of the major brokers. They'll have their own donor advised fund services. And so you can just set it up through an online onboarding. It'll take a few minutes. You'll have your DAF, and then you'll be able to directly contribute to it once the account's open within a couple of days. And so it's easy. There's no filings. We don't have to file like a tax return or anything. That's all taken care of. And it's pretty low cost. There is like they do charge you an AUM fee basically, which might be, I don't know, 60 basis points depending on the provider. And so there's some administrative overhead, but it's pretty set it and forget it. Not a ton of rules. You don't have to make annual distributions. You can contribute money and leave it there for 5 years before you decide which charity you want to support. And so it's pretty low maintenance, pretty simple, and the fees scale pretty well with account size. So if you contribute $20,000, the fees are going to be really low in absolute terms. And if you contribute $1 million, the fees are going to be a little bit higher, but still not crazy. A lot of people like DAFs just for the ease, ease of funding them, and
I'd say ease of funding, setup, funding, and ongoing administration. It is pretty carefree. You don't have to worry about a lot of burden at any point with a DAF.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I think over the last 25 years, people have gotten really familiar with donor advised funds. And so it just became the default strategy that people use when they're gifting to charity.
But that's to say, even though it's the default, there are, and this is one of the things, it's not right for every scenario. And that's really one of the things we want to drive home is there's a bunch of these different charitable structures and they make sense in different scenarios. DAFs have become, because they've become cheap and easy, people just think of it, and it may be right for you, but it doesn't mean it's right for every scenario.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, when does it not make sense? Or I guess, what are the downsides of that?
Yeah. So the downsides, as we were talking about earlier, I think that the two really big downsides compared to other strategies is you don't have control over what happens inside of the DAF. And so there's actually been some court cases about this where people got upset about the DAF administrator doing stuff that they thought was not what they wanted to do. So there was one case back in maybe 2019 or so that got a lot of press, where basically this guy had appreciated assets, and I think it was his company, but it was a very concentrated position, and he contributed it to a DAF, and it was a huge dollar amount, like tens of millions of dollars, I think. And he wanted them to hold it for a certain amount of time and then sell it at the right time based on something like he had some insider information or something about when it was going to be worth more. And so he wanted them to sell at a certain time, and I think he told them that. But then they just went ahead and sold the stock like immediately. And then he sued them, and he was like, that's not what I wanted. And basically, long story short, he lost because it wasn't in his control. And they said that the charity acted reasonably by selling the concentrated position. And so that's one of those things where if you had a different structure, you might have been able to retain that interest for longer and just decide when you wanted to sell it.
Yeah, and just in the interest of time, really, this is with a DAF, it's easy, makes sense for smaller donation amounts, but you don't have control over it. There's no direct personal benefits. You don't really have legacy building. You're not in control of it. So you just have to be aware of that. Low maintenance.
Thank you.